Hello BookTube and welcome to Weekly Reads. I've had a pretty mixed reading week, for the most part positive. To begin, I did read Minor Feelings by Cathy Park Hong. As this is for the BookTube prize, I will only say I've read it, and I will talk more about Minor Feelings as well as the other 6 books for the quarterfinals of the BookTube Prize Nonfiction when the results are announced later this month. So, moving on to the books I can talk about, I have some bails. And yes, I think everybody saw this coming a mile away. So, first up, I decided to read Burnt Sugar by Avni Doshi. This was my selection for the BookTube's band number 2, and it's about a older woman who's suffering the onset of Alzheimer's. She's beginning to forget, and it progressively gets worse. In her young adulthood and her middle adulthood, she was a bit wild and did not treat her daughter very well at all. I didn't get far enough in to see exactly what Tara did to her daughter and Tara, but I've read that it was certainly abusive, certainly neglectful, and outright abusive, I guess, at times. While Tara is going through her decline, as the Alzheimer's begins to more thoroughly affect her, her daughter Antara is experiencing not an insignificant amount of schadenfreude. She's rather enjoying her mother's torment up until, it gets progressively worse. And their relationship is most certainly toxic. So, the writing is gorgeous. I will admit that. But, the story really never did it for me. I found myself uninterested and rather bored. So, yeah, I decided to bail. So, after I bailed on Burnt Sugar, I had enough time to start Fireheart Tiger by Aliette de Boddard, and this one's another bail. So in this one, a princess from one kingdom is sent as a political hostage to another. During her years as a political hostage, something happened to the royal palace. And years later, she returns home, and a few years after that, she is tasked with acting as lead diplomat for a negotiation dealing with the kingdom she was a political hostage in. And while she's performing these duties, one of the princesses from this rival kingdom is part of their delegation, and something happened between the two princesses. And of course, whatever burnt down the one royal palace seems to be following our main protagonist. I didn't think the writing was all that good. I don't know. It didn't quite have de Boddard's usual stylistic wow factor. I've read some of her work. I love the two the first two novels in the Dominion of the Fallen series, House of Shattered Wings and House of Binding Thorns. I thought both novels had a lush prose style. This one just, was not very good. Not very well written, I don't think. There's some gunk on it. Okay. So, from those two bills, I moved on to what can only be the highlight of the week, and it is a highlight of the week. This is obviously my favorite thing I read because, for one thing, I did love it, but for another thing, I didn't bail on it. So, anyway, but I read Tombstone, The Great Chinese Famine, 1950 to 1962 by Jisheng. Like I said a few seconds ago, I love this book. It is amazing. It is exhaustive. It is heartbreaking and infuriating, and just an amazing work of historiography. Jisheng pretty much does an exhaustive history, and this is only half of it. The English translation is only roughly about half of the Chinese original. So in the Chinese original, which is about 1,200 pages, is split into two volumes. The first volume looks at the effects of the famine province by province. And then the second volume looks at the macro level, the state level. Essentially how the Chinese government and Mao facilitated, exacerbated, and the famine. So in English translation, what they did, what the translators did was they selected a few province chapters from volume 1 and slightly more chapters from volume 2, which looks again at the state level or the national level. And I think for the most part, their technique works. It could be a bit disorienting, moving from deep dive into a specific province and then going into how the collectivization worked nationally or the communal kitchens, and then back into a province. And I also think maybe some of the placement of the chapters might have been better served. Particularly, let me see here, chapter 11, China's population loss in the Great Leap Forward, I think probably should have been chapter 1, because it gives the formula that Yang Jisheng uses to sort of formulate his kind of estimation of how many people died and the overall sort of consequences of the famine, both in deaths as well as in lost births or non-existent births. And I think that having that chapter earlier might have been helpful, particularly in relation to the provinces, because those numbers kind of rely on the rubric from that chapter. So maybe putting that chapter in a little bit earlier might have been more appropriate. But yeah, this book was just, amazing. Oh yes. So I'm definitely looking forward to the Yang Jisheng's follow-up, The World Turned Upside Down, which is his history of the Cultural Revolution, which comes on directly from the Great Famine, as the repercussions of the Great Famine sort of um, continue to threaten Mao's position, or at least Mao perceived it to, until he struck back a few years later and initiated the Cultural Revolution. But this book is definitely, if you are interested in Chinese history, a must-read. Highly recommended. So basically, I guess I could do a quick synopsis of the Great Famine. So basically, what happened was the in the late 50s, the Chinese began to collectivize in the provinces, particularly the rural areas. They began to collectivize the farms. As part of that, and as part of a general trend to try to catch up, to surpass the West, Britain, the United States, a tendency started to form where various county party outfits, cadres, would announce that tracts of land were producing excessive, exaggerating how much each tract of land was producing. And it sort of snowballed and escalated and escalated. And as these numbers began to escalate and requisition quotas began to correspondingly increase, until the point where basically the quotas were basically taking over all of the grain that was produced in the province, in prefectures and counties, until essentially there was nothing left, which left the peasants to begin to starve. And as such things happen in totalitarian states, initially there's a cover-up, there's a refusal to see what's happening. Local cadres under pressure would begin to exert increasing amounts of pressure on the peasants to try to get as much grain as they can to send it off, and it just exacerbated the situation. There were some attempts to ameliorate, to sort of lessen the effects, and often these cadres would be punished as right deviationists, until eventually the effects of the famine could no longer be ignored, and by the early 60s, 61, 62, basically the government began to really get around to ameliorating the crisis. So yeah, and Jisheng, or Yang Jisheng, lays pretty much all of the blame on Mao and the Central Committee and on the government. There really was no natural calamity. It was basically a bunch of know-nothing, know-it-allism that sort of exacerbated the crisis, as the political system really couldn't handle people telling the truth when the pressure was to continue on with programs that were causing the famine. So anyway, but yeah, definitely highly recommend this book. This is amazing. So what will I be reading next week? So tomorrow I intend to read Interior Chinatown by Charles Yu. This is the most recent winner of the National Book Award. And yeah, it's about an actor, Willis Wu, who wishes to advance his career. And I must admit there was some trepidation on my part for this, regarding this novel. I've read Charles Yu's, one of his collection of short stories, Third Class Superhero, and while I liked some of the stories, for the most part, I really didn't like the collection. And one thing I'm hoping is that Interior Chinatown is rather similar to one of the stories in that collection that I did quite like. But we shall see, and hopefully I do get on with it. So if everything goes according to plan during the work week, I will be getting to A Heart Divided by Yong. This is the concluding volume in the Legend of the Condor Heroes novel. And I'm pretty sure it starts off where the previous volume ended. So this is heading towards the conclusion of the various subplots and the main plots and everything, and I'm really looking forward to getting to it. And I will talk about more about the Legend of the Condor Heroes series when I finally finish it. I think I might do a special video dedicated to Legend of the Condor Heroes. And if I have any need for an alternate, I went ahead and selected an alternate. And for this coming week, the alternate is The Last Shah, America, Iran, and the Fall of the Pahlavi Dynasty by Takeyh. This is obviously a history of the Iranian Revolution and focusing on the Shah's overthrow, which I'm quite looking forward to. It came out earlier this year, and really looking forward to getting to. So yeah, so that's what I've read, what I will be reading. I'm hoping at some point once I finish Legend of the Condor Hero series, I can go and read, or not read, watch one of the many, and I do mean many, televised television adaptations. Basically, every 10 years or less, there's a new adaptation of one of the constituent parts of the Condor Heroes trilogy. So I'm kind of, and I'm really hoping I can find the 2017 version. The last time I checked on Amazon, I think they had one from the 2000s, but I'm really hoping I can find the 2017 one. And I know I mentioned, like yesterday's videos, that I was hoping to do my contribution to season 2 of Has Steve Read It? I filmed that video earlier today, and I just wasn't feeling it. I don't know if it were the books I selected just didn't really click with me, but I didn't really enjoy talking about them all that much. And I remember really having a blast with my selections last year, or not last year, because it's more like a year and a half ago when I did my contribution to season 1 of Has Steve Read It? But also I wanted to try to get like the books that when Steve does comment on my video, and whether or not he's read the books I'm offering up, that his commentary on those books, whether he's read them or not, is as much fun as my last contribution to Has Steve Read It, because I rewatched it recently and it was fun. I really enjoyed it. I must really enjoy the ones that he's actually read, so you can like talk about them a bit more. But we shall see. I'm gonna kind of go back through and maybe change up some of my selections. Whether or not those lead to successful beans or quantum level face palming, I don't entirely know. We shall see. And hopefully I'll be able to do that on Monday. And then on Tuesday and maybe the rest of the week I might do some tags. And then of course next Friday will be weekly reads. So until then, BookTube, thank you. Have a great evening and weekend, and I will see you on Monday. Take care and stay safe.